You know, some days you wake up in this world and you move around in it and you just feel like it's laughing at you. Like the present reality of the world that you live in is laughing at you. Like nothing is sacred and nothing that you're doing or anything that you did in the past has any real meaning. Like the world is just kind of moving on without you, and also violently erasing your past in front of you, and there's just nothing you can do about it. I had this feeling today as I was driving down University Boulevard. I was driving by my old school, the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And I looked to the south of me and I just saw this big cloud of smoke and dust and dirt just swooshing into the atmosphere above Birmingham. And it was so sudden and so quick. I thought something had either exploded or something was on fire. It was like a smoldering kind of smoke. I was really concerned, and I made a detour. I went up 18th Street to get a better look, to investigate, and it was, sure enough, the Arts and Humanities building at the University of Alabama at Birmingham being demolished. And I've known for a very long time that this has been on the slate for demolition. They're going through UAB, kind of like modern Las Vegas, and they're just demolishing all of the old buildings that have been there for years to make room for brand new architecture. Somehow I've been lying to myself though, and it's just been standing there vacant for years and years. And every time I go by it, I just keep thinking like they're going to find a use for this. They're not going to demolish it. It's too unique. It has too much character. Right? They should be embarrassed, ashamed of themselves to knock something like this down. Even though it is admittedly ugly, it nevertheless is a thing of UAB's history. Even though UAB only goes back to like 1971, that's the year that the Arts and Humanities building was constructed, was in 1971. I know that's very recent history, but for a university to be going into its 50s, I suppose that's kind of an important milestone to hold on to. But yeah, the Arts and Humanities building is the first building at UAB where I went to class as a freshman back in 2001. It was like in August of 2001 that I had my first class there. I think it was like an English composition class, which is like the classes that I'm still teaching there at UAB today now, I guess. Right? What is that now? 24 years later? 23? I don't know. It doesn't seem like that long ago, but it does seem a very long time ago because like I just at the same time, because I have been a graduate student there now for the last 3 years, and none of the other students that I'm there with, as well as some of the professors, have any recollection of ever going to classes in the Arts and Humanities building, or just ever teaching in it, and just that's because it's been vacant for so long. Because UAB a while ago built a substitution building, so it's just been standing there vacant for now probably half a decade, maybe even more, just waiting to get demolished. And so they're finally doing it this week, tearing down the Arts and Humanities building, this 5-story monstrosity of brutalist architecture. And it does have a lot of personality, and in a way a lot of people just hate that, because yeah, it is a big ugly building. It was probably ugly back in the early 70s when they built it, and it's certainly ugly now. It's just one of those buildings that looks like I don't know, like a postmodern motel, like something out of I don't know, like a dystopic J.G. Ballard novel or whatever, like this high rise that is surrounded by balconies, and every room that you enter is from the outside. So you take the stairway breezeways or the elevators. They were always crickety. Nobody I knew ever took those elevators. It's like they just seem too dangerous at all times. But yeah, people would go to classes there, and they would walk outside and then enter the classes from the outside. And there were also like mazes of offices and all that. I know the English department was based out of the Arts and Humanities building. And back in 2001, when I started classes there, like students would still smoke, so they would nobody smokes now. No college. I guess that's a good thing. Yeah, no college students smoke now. I guess they vape, but yeah, they would just stand outside in the breezeways, and they would smoke cigarettes. I would have very long classes, like at night at the Arts and Humanities building, with this my filmmaking professor, this guy named Jean Baudin, and he was this French guy who couldn't go about 5 minutes without smoking a cigarette. So yeah, we would go out. He would usually put on a movie for us, and then he would go out and smoke cigarettes while the movie was playing. And we would usually go out and join him and hang out and just talk film. So we would essentially have like the whole class out there on the breezeway while the movie played inside. So it's a good memory there. But yeah, it just and yeah, people now have always considered it an eyesore, and they're just kind of waiting for it to go. And certainly the professors and some of the students that I've talked to in the last few years are ready to see it go. Not only for it just being a big, ugly building, but also for the fact that on the front there is a plaque that does say this building dedicated by George C. Wallace, Governor, 1971. Yes, yeah, George C. Wallace was obviously the famous segregationist governor of Alabama, who ran for president unsuccessfully, and I think it was 1968. And he was shot. He wasn't unlike Robert Kennedy, who died. He lived, but yeah, George Wallace's famous slogan was segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. And so yeah, and that they never took down that plaque. And I guess not, because like again, the building has been boarded up and it's been fenced in. Since even before they started removing Confederate statues, and people began to become really sensitive to that stuff a few years ago. So, but yeah, they tore it down today. They got rid of it, and it just it was even though I sort of stood publicly with all the people that said like, yeah, it's a big ugly building and it's a racist building, let it go away. I was always a little bit sad because one. It is one of the original buildings, I think maybe the only original building left on the UAB campus from when the university opened a little over 50 years ago. And even though 50 years ago doesn't necessarily constitute deep history that we should revere, in America, we don't revere history that's even really seriously sacred a lot of the times. It still is like a big get, because when UAB opened in the early 70s as an extension of the University of Alabama, to basically as a school that would allow people who couldn't travel to Tuscaloosa to still go to school within the University of Alabama system, it really wasn't considered, I think, that much like very viable. And then over the next 50 years and on into today, UAB's become a very attractive college. It's not only that, but it's a top flight medical center, one of the best in the United States, if not the world. And so I think like I was living in denial, I think, for a long time that they would find something to do with that building. But no, they finally got around to it. Yeah, I just went up to it today after I saw that huge plume of smoke expel, like you're, I don't know, taking out an old blanket and slapping it on the rail of the back deck. and just letting all that all that smoke expel from it. Yeah, I looked, and it just looked like a horribly disfigured, person, just like screaming for air as this, I don't know, like this shredded out big piece of like machinery, like a backhoe or whatever they call those things, with its big hydraulic claw, was just scratching at the surface. It just looks so ugly and sad, and that was ultimately, I think, why I, normally, I don't know, as I said, some days you wake up and you just feel like the world is laughing at you, and any memories that you have. And a lot of times you get this feeling like when you go to the mall or something, like we all grew up in malls and going to malls, and when you walk through the mall, you look at all these empty spaces, or these spaces that are taken up by like just bullshit stores. And you think about the things that used to be there that used to really mean something to you, and they're closed, and that nothing in retail and nothing in capitalism is sacred, but you still made memories there, and you still feel nostalgic about it. And when those stores close up and just a new one opens in its place, you feel like just the world is kind of laughing at you a little bit, like, screw your memory, or screw things that are important to you, right? And yeah, like the world, as we age and as we grow older, is definitely eroding beneath our feet. Like we are constantly just moving from one thing to the next, and the only thing that we have to have is our memories, right? But very rarely do we see such a punch in the gut as I did today, when I just when I saw just the tortured face of the University of Alabama Arts and Humanities building, just like opening wide and just shrieking. It looked like it was just looking at me for help, and just, it was like half of the building, half of the floors were all gone, and it was just severed in half. And I just saw I don't know, like cords hanging everywhere, like intestines, and I can't even, and the even after the claw had finished scratching at it, mortally wounding it, the roof had just caved in, and there was just this constant trickle of shingles, right, just like falling down into the earth, and it just sounded like it was crying. It really was, like, I mean, it was a personification personified, I suppose. Anyway, but yeah, I'm looking out in the distance toward the direction of the former Arts and Humanities building right now for my office, in the Midnight Citizen Studio here in Birmingham, Alabama. And this is the Midnight Citizen Studio, and welcome to the show. I am your host, Mike Booty. Just having some coffee here at night, and probably about to step outside if you want to join me and talk about some more stuff. Yeah, I've really been trying to temper my inclinations to nostalgia lately. I am a generally very nostalgic person. I think most people are, but most people can temper it quite well. I think, like, if you're maybe it just, especially as an adult, it comes down to perhaps like what you do for a living, or maybe the way that you prioritize your responsibilities. Like generally people like me who work in English and composition and write and do podcasts and read books and watch a lot of movies, and are surrounded by friends who like to do the same, people in our lives. We tend to be very nostalgic people. very romantic people. I think people who are driven by things like finance, business, stock options and mergers, and all that generally are a little bit better because their lives are not spent thinking about the past and trying to diagnose the present. Perhaps I guess maybe to a degree, like if you're in business or whatever, you're looking for things, but what you're doing, you're looking for you're speculating on the future. You're more like looking toward the future, right? Like a few years ago, I guess maybe the two things clashed, right? Like Stranger Things came on Netflix, and all of a sudden everything was like in the 80s. So you're speculating on everything in the future being about the past, I suppose, right? But yeah, but it's a little bit on my mind lately to just temper my nostalgia. Again, you go by and like if I'm a very romantic person who can't control my nostalgic instincts, right? Seeing the Arts and Humanities building being gutted today would have probably driven me insane, and maybe in the old days would have driven me to write a really long Facebook post about it, about how nothing's sacred anymore or something like that. But I didn't do that. I took a few pictures of it. I mourned it for a few minutes, and then I kind of moved on with my day, right? But dangerous to dwell in nostalgia. Sometimes I think lately I've been just very irritated. I think like nostalgia is holding us back in a lot of ways. I think it's one of the reasons why we haven't particularly had like a whole lot of great films in the past 20 years or so, because everything's just based so much in remakes and reboots, and things are just all set in the past, set in the 80s or the 90s or whatever, just to kind of get like a quick laugh from the audience or whatever. I think culturally, like politics-wise, Donald Trump's entire presidency and current run for the presidency is all about nostalgia, right? Like, make America great again. People want to restore America back to this false sense of what it used to be. That's the thing about nostalgia, is that like you're always remembering things slightly incorrectly, and just taking for granted the fact that when you go through really good times, you very rarely realize that you're having a good time. And so this is why people go to high school reunions, I think, a lot, especially, people who probably didn't have a very good time in high school, but, they go back to high school reunions and they're like, man, that was the best 4 years of my life. Right. Yeah. But I don't know. I guess like I always think about this movie About Schmidt with Jack Nicholson, right? Where he has a job at like an insurance company for 50 years and then he retires. And it's like that typical thing where, the movie opens and he's sitting in this office on the last day of his job, of his career, and he doesn't look very happy. And he goes to his retirement dinner and he doesn't look very happy there either. And it could just be because he's retiring and he doesn't want to give any of it up, but he just genuinely doesn't seem to like his office or like anybody that he's surrounded by. And it takes him about 3 or 4 days of retirement, and then he goes back to visit his old office. and he sits there with the guy who replaces him, some like 30-year-old guy, who humors him for a few minutes. And, Jack Nicholson says, anything you need to know, anything I can help you with? And the young whippersnapper is like, no, I think we're all set up here. And then he checks his watch and pretends like he has a meeting, and he's like, oh, I got a meeting out west. Gets up and Jack Nicholson leaves the building and he's walking on the sidewalk, and he comes across the alley of the building, and he notices all these files in the dumpster that are labeled Schmidt. So this is like his life's work, all that stuff, like right there, right? And yeah, it just sends him into this huge depression, because he's a guy who seems to dwell in what he was in the past rather than focus on what he is in the present, or what he's going to do in the future. So, just some thoughts on that tonight. I'm sure they've made some good movies in the past 10 or 20 years. I think I've seen some of them. Like I don't hate every new movie that I watch. And it is true though, if I do watch a movie that I genuinely don't like, that is made in the present day, I get really annoyed, because I just think, like, I would much rather be watching another movie that I'm familiar with and that I know I'm going to enjoy. That's like whenever my wife and I sit down to watch a movie, I try to have in mind what movie we're going to watch, because what happens if we don't know the movie we're going to watch before we start searching, and I know you're familiar with this. It's the paradox of choice, right? You search and search and search on all these different platforms that you have, and you eventually end up watching a movie or television show that you've seen over and over and over again, just because you get so worn down by trying to find something new, and you just much rather watch something that you are familiar with, right? That takes you back to a certain place in time when you first saw it, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, and when I go, I went to the movie theater last week to see Deadpool and Wolverine. I was talking about that, and when I watched that movie, I was just so, like, I liked parts of it as I went into a lot of detail on last week's show, but I like parts of it, but most of it was just me watching this movie that was designed to, I guess, entertain kids while also entertaining adults who grew up with comic books in the 80s and 90s, and they grew up reading Wolverine and Deadpool, and on top of that, they were spinning out all these movie references, and every time they would do that, I just would kind of like be like, I'd rather watch that movie that they're talking about rather than the movie that they're watching, right now. Right. And, yeah, and I was having this conversation with a friend of mine last night. He had, he works in production, and he, managed to buy a camera recently. It's, like a super nice, commercial camera, and he told me it's the same camera that they used to shoot like a number of feature films, including the movie Drive. And this is a movie that came out about 12 years ago and is beloved by like a lot of people, especially film lovers. Love this movie, and I've never liked Drive, even though it, by all accounts, has all the stuff in it that I should like, right? It's a neo-noir crime movie. It's got a lot of neon in it, too. Neo-neon noir. That should be a genre. Yeah, it's a crime movie. It's got some car chases in it. It's got like a stoic kind of anti-hero who's going up against a scary mob boss played by Albert Brooks. I love Albert Brooks, right? It's got all the stuff in it that I love, and everybody loves this movie. I don't like it very much, and I think the reason being is because when I see Drive, all I want to do is I want to go watch the movies that inspired it that I loved. Like I want to go back and watch Michael Mann's Thief. I want to go back and watch Walter Hill's The Driver. Two movies that, the writer-director of Drive drew heavy inspiration from. And yeah, like I would much rather watch Albert Brooks play a self-deprecating schlub than the kind of maniac that he plays in Drive, where he's like killing people and things like that. Yeah, it's I just so he said I bought the camera that was used to shoot Drive. I'm like, that's great. Shoot better stuff with it than that, And I know it's like I'm being mean because it's a present day movie that is perfectly good, that has every right in the world to be respected. But I just don't like it because I just feel like it's like when I watch a movie made in the modern day, I want to see a movie that is doing something new and not just just taking things from all over the place and putting it in a blender and like hitting frappe. And so I'm sure I've seen some movies in recent years that are like that, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. So yeah, like when I want to watch when my wife and I, or when I just usually watch a movie, like my wife's in a show tonight. She's doing a show, and while I was eating dinner, I put on Terminator 2 and made pasta. It's like I know I'm gonna like Terminator 2, and it's a frankly very original movie that came out like over 30 years ago that I just really enjoy, And yeah, as I said last week, it sometimes when I critique modern movies for the same reason, like, oh, they're just drawing from all these other movies, I get cast as like a curmudgeon or as a snob by a lot of people. But I don't know, it's just that's the way I am with movies, I guess. So, yeah, like last week, my wife came home from doing her show, and she just, like ordered some food, and she just vegged out. And we did this thing where we were just like surfing through channels endlessly, trying to find something. Not channel surfing, through platforms like Netflix, Amazon, Paramount, whatever. All the stuff that I'm sure I'm like paying a fortune for every month, And we just eventually decided to do something different. We said, like, let's watch an older movie that we've never seen before, but have always had on our list, even if it's going to be a tough one. Because between me and Jessica, we've seen like pretty much all the old movies. So like if there's an old movie that we have never seen before, it's for some reason. And we decided to put on Requiem for a Dream. Neither one of us had ever seen this movie before. I believe this is from the year 2000, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it's just because Requiem for a Dream is a movie that was highly controversial back in the day. And to this day, every time I talk to somebody about it, they kind of quease when they talk about it. They cringe a little bit. It was apparently like a very uncomfortable movie, and I just didn't know if that's the feeling that I wanted on like a whatever it was, like a Sunday afternoon when we watched it. But at the same time, I also just wanted to see a film. I wanted to be like surprised by a film that I had never seen before, and Jessica was kind of in the right mindset, and we were also both just so burnt out trying to find a movie that we could agree on, so we just put on Requiem for a Dream. And yeah, this movie lives up to its reputation. As a matter of fact, for about the first, it's the thing the movie has going with it is that it's very intense, but it is short. It's only about an hour and 30 minutes. It's not like one of these like 2.5 hour long just torture fest. So, it's kind of like maybe getting shot in the head rather than being tortured. I suppose. I don't know. Very violent, but it's a violent movie, you know. But yeah, for like the first 70 minutes of it or so, it to me was not as bad as I had been led to believe. It was fairly tame, especially by today's standards. You know, we've just, you know, this is 25 years later, and we have come like a long way in terms of what we can handle and just visceral stuff that appears on television and in movies that we can take. But I was still very shocked by the ending of this movie. So, but yeah, Requiem for a Dream is a movie about heroin addicts in New York City, and heroin dealers and dealers who become addicts and addicts who become dealers and all that. It's based on a novel by Hubert Selby Jr., who also wrote Last Exit to Brooklyn. And I tried reading Last Exit to Brooklyn several times. I've begun it about 3 or 4 times. It's the writing is, you know, Hubert Selby is like, he's like William S. Burroughs, if you've ever read like Naked Lunch or something. Just one of these, I don't know if you would call him like a beatnik voice. He's not like Jack Kerouac or anything, but he is, you know, like Philip Roth or somebody, like just like one of those manic, free associative, like modernist writers, I suppose. And it, you know, his books were obviously very shocking when they came out in the 50s, and I think Requiem for a Dream was published a little later, like in the 70s. But yeah, one of the reasons why I've never been able to get through Last Exit to Brooklyn is because I'll pick it up and I'll read the first 25 pages. And the first 25 pages are written in almost unbroken language, like very few sentence breaks. And it's just a stream of consciousness. And it's actually very good. But when I put it down, I lose that stream. You know what I mean? So when I pick it back up again, I forget where I was, and it doesn't necessarily have a lot of really good places to stop. You know, it's one of these books where the chapters are like 60 pages long. So, and it is very hard to follow, right? So yeah, he's like one of these guys, just a very, very dangerous kind of writer, I suppose. I don't know, in the terms of like what subject matter he's covering and the frank manner of like the language, and also just the way he tells his story is just so out of his mind that you really do need to it just feels like read one of his, like the entire book in one long go, which I don't have the time for. So but yeah, so Requiem for a Dream is there's like these two lovers in it, right? Like Jared Leto and Jennifer Connelly, and kind of a big deal for Jennifer Connelly at the time because she was like this up and coming actress and obviously one of the most beautiful women ever. For her to do this movie, which is just very dangerous and daring, especially what she does at the end of the movie. If you've seen it, you know. If you know, you know. And but yeah, they're these two people who, like Jared Leto and his partner Marlon Wayans, start out selling heroin to finance. I guess they're going into like the record business, like they want to open up a music store or something. Like in the early parts of the movie, they're like playing, you know, they're playing music and they're DJing and things like that. So they have to take heroin as well at the beginning because they need to know how strong it is so that they know how to cut it. I don't know what that means, but, you know, when you get a big brick of heroin, do they call it bricks? I don't know. When you get a big brick of heroin, you don't just like parcel out the heroin and then sell it. You have to like mix it with stuff so that you distill it and cut it down and you can maximize your profits that way, right? So like nobody comes out here and just hears me talking in a recorder about how to make heroin happen. I don't know. but yeah, but obviously, you know, they break that Tony Montana rule, right? They get high in their own supply. And it seems like Marlon Wayans has a little bit more control over what he's doing, but his problem is that he's black, right? So he gets you know, caught up in a drug deal gone bad, and he runs from the police. And even though he really didn't do anything except just be there, right, he still gets thrown in prison. And later on, he's in the South, and he gets caught by the cops in the South. So he's, you know, treated like a black man in the South in jail, right? So very, very badly. But yeah, like Jared Leto is the guy who really gets hooked on heroin in like a real bad way, and just develops this horrible infection on his arm. And they show very up close shots of it, and shots of the needle going into the arm. And oh my God, I can imagine a certain audience being very turned on by some of this body horror. But yeah, for me, I was flinching away most of the time, right? But yeah, and then there's Ellen Burstyn, who is so good in this movie. I gotta say, you know, Ellen Burstyn is obviously Chris in The Exorcist, and was in a lot of 70s movies, and kind of, I think, kept working, but her profile was nowhere near as big in the late 90s as it was in the early to mid 70s. But yeah, she plays Jared Leto's mom, who does not get addicted to heroin, but gets addicted to weight loss pills. So very much like Ozempic, right? That we have today, you know, these weight loss miracle drugs that just people get addicted on. And, you know, obviously that was forecasting the opioid epidemic that we've come to reckon with so much, because, you know, like the cities, you know, in the countries as well, it started with heroin, and then it became prescription painkillers, right? And then meth, I think, and now they all seem to kind of coexist. But yeah, Ellen Burstyn is just in her apartment the entire movie, and like she gets this, I guess, scammy phone call at the beginning of the movie from somebody who says, you know, we're going to send you an application. If you send that application in, we're going to put you on television. And so the whole movie, she's just like, I'm going to be on television. And so she's trying to slim down to fit into a dress, like a red dress that she wants to wear on television. And so she starts taking this weight loss medication. She just goes to the doctor, and the doctor just doesn't even look at her as he prescribes it. So the movie is very much indicting you know, the medical profession, and just these, I guess, general practitioners who just like will scribble something on a script and just throw it over to you and just say, you know, get out of my office, I got other patients. So yeah, she very quickly becomes addicted to this drug, and like her refrigerator starts to talk to her because you know, the more pills she takes, the more of a tolerance she builds up. So she becomes hungry for both food and the medication, so it just doesn't do its job. And so yeah, eventually she ends up as just one of those crazy women on the subway who's just babbling nonsense. And but yeah, she's so good in it, and it's such a tragic it's so tragic. It really is, like, just her character's arc in that movie. I don't know if you can really call it an arc. It's just like, you know, it comes to a peak and then it crashes, right? But it is good. But yeah, and yeah, the last 20 minutes of the movie is just everything goes wrong all at once, like all those movies do. But the way that it's cut and edited is just so grating. I think in a good way, but it is very much meant to make you cringe and just make you watch through your fingers, and it's not a fun experience. It's like the Starfield sequence in 2001, but you're not watching it, right? It's just on and on and on nonsense. but just designed to make you sink into your seat and cover your eyes. As Ellen Burstyn is getting electroshock therapy, and they cut off Jordan Leto's arm, and Jennifer Connelly has to resort to prostituting herself in the worst possible way in front of a bunch of frat bros. And yeah, the movie just ends with this amazing shot, and I won't give it away if you've never seen it before, but it's just this moment that one person in the movie is allowed to be happy, but it's not a good happy. What she did to get that happiness is not good. So I think it's Jennifer Connelly. So she ends up with a gigantic brick of heroin at the end of the movie for doing what she did, and she is I guess she bakes herself off into the sunset. I don't know, but anyway. So yeah, Requiem for a Dream. So yeah, we watched it, and I guess glad we watched it. I don't know. This is just a movie that, more than anything else, after we were talking about it, I guess like back in the day when it first came out, the movie was kind of designed to get you to talk about the things about like what is a drug, what, like a drug can be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be, heroin, or even prescription medication. It basically just has to be anything that makes you happy, that gives you just a quick burst of happiness, and that you routinely chase and you feel like you can't live without, right? And so, again, like in the beginnings of the movie, Jared Leto takes his mom's television and pawns it to get some money to go buy some heroin. And once he sells that heroin, he'll take it back, he'll get the TV and bring it back to her. Well, Ellen Burstyn has these huge television withdrawals at the beginning of the movie. So right then and there, like, the movie is just making the statement that you can't, television is a drug. It's one of those things that if we watch it and it's taken away from us, we have withdrawals. And the more we watch television, the more we get miserable, because we're trying to chase that feeling of when we first saw that TV glow, right? To quote a recent movie that I haven't seen, but it looks very nostalgic. Yeah, so I think that's what the movie's designed to get you to talk about. More than anything else, when Jessica and I finished watching it the other day, we were more like reminiscing over filmmaking in the late 90s and early 2000s. And just what kind of an exciting time it was for movie making. Like, the year 1999 is often considered to be like the best year for modern filmmaking. In fact, I did an entire podcast on that a few years ago about all the films that came out in 1999. But yeah, it was just a very exciting time when movies had a lot of energy, and there were just a lot of new voices, and narratives were being deconstructed, and just movies were being told to us in different ways and sold to us. And there was a whole new way of watching movies and talking about them with like the internet and everything. So, and yeah, we were just talking about, both of us had this experience where neither one of us saw Requiem for a Dream, because it was one of these movies that was just evangelized by every film nerd that we knew. And if you're one of those film nerds, listen to the show. I'm sorry about this. But yeah, it's like it was talked to about us so much that neither one of us saw it until the other day, and now that I saw it, I can talk to you about it. So yeah, here it goes. So yeah, after we finished watching Requiem for a Dream, you know how it does on those streaming services now. As soon as it cuts to the credits, it immediately gives you another movie. And so it's so annoying, and you have to like really reach for that. You have to be a quick draw on the remote to because sometimes you just want to watch the credits and let the credits like just soak over you. I don't know. I don't know if that's an old-fashioned idea or whatever, It's like but yeah, they do that. They just immediately go to the next movie so that they can I guess, keep selling you ads or whatever. So, but I don't know. In this case, we actually let the next movie come up because we were already in this mode of late 90s drug movies and made by interesting filmmakers. And the next one that came up was Trainspotting. And both of us had seen this movie before. But I hadn't seen that movie since I was a sophomore in high school, I think. And I rented it from the video store because it just looked like a hip, cool movie. And I wanted that in my life when I was in high school. And I didn't really get it because I wasn't a heroin addict. And I think I was just also just a little too young. But I do remember just really enjoying like the fast-paced kinetic style of Trainspotting. And I think that's the thing. It's like Requiem for a Dream is just a straight-up thriller drama. And Trainspotting is much more comedic. And I think satirizes the fashion, satirizes that the 90s in a way, that the fashion has become to take drugs, right? And very much like the fashion drug of the 90s was heroin. And Jessica reminded me of, like Kate Moss, like heroin chic, right? And yeah, we watched Trainspotting and had a really great time with that. Although, like there is obviously, I think one of the reasons why I haven't watched Trainspotting since I was in high school was because of that like one scene in the movie that just is the ultimate, gross out. It's, like Ewan McGregor, who played, didn't he play Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars? Yeah, he drops his heroin down this disgusting public toilet, and he has to dive into the toilet to retrieve it. And when he's in the toilet, it just turns into like he's diving through the ocean to go get it. And years later, having read Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon, I'm pretty sure that's actually a reference to Gravity's Rainbow, because there's a scene in that book very early on when the young Malcolm X drops his harmonica into a toilet, and he has to dive into the toilet to get the harmonica. And it's an extended sequence of Malcolm X kind of navigating his way through all the pipes and eventually ending up diving through the Atlantic Ocean to retrieve his harmonica. But it's beside the point. But but yeah, Trainspotting was I was thoroughly surprised by how much I enjoyed that on the second watch. More than 25 years after I first saw it. That was a really, really fun movie. And just like, again, in that same style of Requiem for a Dream where, there's interesting camera angles and great music choices, just a great soundtrack. Trainspotting is just so full of life and vibrancy. Even when you see these characters going through such a terrible time, everything is just done so well. I think like that was the key to filmmaking that a lot of these emerging filmmakers in the 90s brought. Like Requiem for a Dream was done by like Darren Aronofsky, and Trainspotting was Danny Boyle. And these filmmakers, and I think a lot of the other ones that were their contemporaries, what they did really well was like where the 80s filmmaking is all about surface, and you're just watching actors play characters and just exhibit behaviors to show what they're thinking. I think it's in the 90s you get like really unique, fascinating camera angles, and you get new editing techniques and that are really designed to put you inside the heads of these characters or make you be a character yourself standing alongside these people that you're watching. And that's the feeling that I got from both of these movies, and Trainspotting especially, because it's just there's just something that's just so unique about the way that movie looks. And I don't know if I can really describe it, but just all the interiors are just so drab and ugly, and they are a great contrast with the way that the characters behave and just the rapid fire dialogue. And there's also a thing in it, and I don't know if it's just a Scottish movie, because it's like the movie really needs subtitles, but we didn't put on the subtitles. But they talk so freaking fast in the movie that it is almost like a foreign language, and it almost is like, you know, it doesn't really matter what the characters are saying throughout the movie. It makes you just all the more just observe the environment and what they're in, and the fact that these characters just seem to be oblivious, or I guess bemused by the world they're going through. It's like just this ugly, decaying world in modern Scotland that is so ugly and kind of makes you understand why they're doing heroin. Because just anything to get away from that, and anything to feel like this artificial surge of happiness, right? It's why, like, you know, it's like if we get a plate and it's just like, you know, boring, plain, unspiced food, you know, just like a little bit of hot sauce does all the difference, I guess, in the world. I guess that's, if that makes any sense at all. Yeah, Trainspotting is, yeah, that was our 1990s druggy double feature, I guess. Again, like, neither me or Jessica have ever dabbled in that. But more than anything else, just watching these movies again it made me feel just all the more nostalgic for 90s filmmaking, because that is like it's like you know, just modern filmmaking, just a lot of modern movies really does get me quite depressed and quite irritated, with just how everything seems to be made so safe now, and you know, just no risks are taken almost ever. And yeah, generally when I like watch movies, I you know, now I see what movies inspired them, and I would much rather go back and watch those movies, you know. All right, it's a little bit later now. I had to switch recorders because the batteries on my Zoom H1 ran out. Those are AAAs. I didn't have any more AAA batteries, so I switched to my H4 Zoom, which has AA batteries. So I don't record on this one so much anymore because it's just so bulky, and you can't really bring it anywhere because, like, if there's like a security check or anything, it looks like a bomb. So, or these Zooms, you know, they have the stereophonic sound, the microphones that the two microphones on top that point either way, and so it looks like a taser also. So it's like a weapon, but it is very bulky. It's hard to tote around and to hold. I need to go to the gym. This thing's heavy. So, but, yeah. And speaking of frat bros standing around watching a gangbang, yikes. Like I saw in Requiem for a Dream, or I didn't see. I looked away during the whole sequence. It was just too horrifying. But I did want to talk about a book that I just finished listening to. Just as I said, this summer has just been full of driving around, delivering food, delivering packages for Amazon, just being in the car all day long. And I'm so glad that I'm about to cut back on that significantly, because I do start teaching college again in a couple of weeks, and I recently just got another appointment at a community college to teach some English composition classes there, so that's good. So looks like I'll be taken care of. I'll be eating this fall, so that's really good. And as will my wife. My wife is Jessica is about to finish up a play that she's doing, and then she's going right into directing another play. So that's good. So we're fine. So, but what was I talking about? Yeah, I was talking about an audiobook that I've been listening to. Just finished it yesterday, called Among the Bros. And this is a nonfiction book, which is pretty much all I can listen to on audio. I can't really listen to fiction books. I'd much rather be like reading physical copies of fiction books. But like nonfiction audiobooks are totally fine. I don't know why that is. As it's true life, I don't know. I can. You don't really pay too much attention to like the technique and themes that you do when reading fiction books. I guess that, I don't know, that sounds a little snobby, I suppose. But yeah, I do have a real affinity for like a good nonfiction book. And this one, Among the Bros, is about a true life story of a drug ring that was busted up a few years ago at the College of Charleston. It was being run entirely out of the Sigma Alpha frat house. And so this fascinates me because it wasn't like the only one. Like there's a lot of reckoning, I guess, culture's been doing with like with bros lately, and people that come from frats. You know, like frats are typically on college campuses. They're full of, you know, rich white men, right, who can you know, come from very prominent families. And I did not join a frat. I had no interest in joining a frat. When I was down at the University of Alabama, they had some at UAB, but it wasn't really. Greek life was not a big thing at UAB, where I started as a freshman in 2001 in the Arts and Humanities building. But yeah, when I went down to the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, Greek life is a big deal. And they have those typical, you know, frat rows and sorority rows, bro rows, I guess, that are right there next to Bryant-Denny Stadium. And it's big life. And, you know, you always typically think about frats as being just, you know, frat houses as being houses of ill repute. But you know, we've come a long way since the days of Animal House, is the basic premise that this book goes on. You know, like in the 1979 film Animal House, you had the frats, you know, drinking and partying all day and having like toga parties and, you know, taking young women up to their rooms to have consensual sex, I guess. And it's not really like that anymore, and hasn't been for a long time. But there's a dark turn that frats have taken, and this book primarily focuses on frats like in the South. As I said, it starts at the College of Charleston in South Carolina, and it is focuses primarily on this one kid named Mikey Schmidt, who at 21 years old was busted as one of the heads of this interstate crime ring where they were running like weed and cocaine and Xanax and other prescription medications from frat house to frat house, state to state. Some of it went through the University of Alabama, where I graduated from in 2006. And it was just this massive drug ring that was broken up. And what I find so fascinating about the story is that these are rich white kids. They don't need to be, they're on their way. They come for money. You know, you get that typical image of like the rich frat kid, you know, white, upper class, you know, family is like in politics or something, or high up in business. And, but for some reason they're playing like super poor. They're like doing poverty cosplay. And they talk a lot about the pledge, like initiation, that a lot of these people have to go through. Like they say like one pledge from the Sigma Alphas is to, you know, go around in like dirty overalls and just dress like a bum for like an entire week on campus. Go around not taking showers. And the reason behind this initiation ritual is because they tell the kids, like, this is the last time you're going to look poor for your entire life. After this, it's all cake, right? So just dabble in poverty, and then come back to live among the rich, right? And so they don't need to be doing all these things, and smuggling cocaine and Xanax and weed. But the reason that they're doing it is because it is cosplay. It's a type of cosplay, because there's like this notion that these kids grew up watching shows like The Sopranos, and The Wire, and seeing these movies in the 90s like New Jack City. And they grow up wanting to emulate the people that they see in these movies. Like normal people like me and you would watch these movies and just be like, man, these are dark tales about the worlds of drugs, right? But no, they want to emulate, the dealers and the traffickers that they see on television. And throughout the book, there's several anecdotes of how these kids got by for so long without being caught because they were utilizing the same techniques as the drug dealers that they were seeing on television. Like there's this one instance where a guy was, they would get these pledges to run the drugs for them from frat house to frat house. And they would go in these SUVs that looked like mommy SUVs, and they would put baby on board stickers on them. So that the idea was that the police would never pull over a suspected drug dealer, thinking they were a drug dealer because, they had like a baby on board bumper sticker, right? And they learned that off of the show Weeds, that show with, what's her name? Who, she was like a mom in the suburbs who supported her family after her husband died by selling marijuana to all the rich people in town, all of her rich neighbors, right? And so, the movie or the book, it is like a movie, honestly. It's like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a Netflix miniseries that's made out of this in the next few years. Because the book just came out a few months ago, I think. But yeah, it begins with a murder. Like this frat kid is murdered in his frat house. They find him. He had just been shot, and he's just clinging on to life and putting pressure on the wound with a whole bunch of thin Chipotle napkins. And so, the murder investigation traces back to this kid Mikey Schmidt, who comes from a very prominent South Carolina family. Just what I find so interesting about this story is the trajectory of drug culture and why it still exists and why it's never been worse than it has been, because we've had like this feedback loop of pop culture and societal problems for some time now. What I find is so interesting is that we could say like the modern drug epidemic, like crack cocaine, that proliferated in the 80s, and before that it was all about cocaine, and before that weed. It was done primarily by people who were coming from impoverished lifestyles, primarily the African American community, and they were trying to make their lives better. I think what they were doing is they were probably seeing like this unattainable lifestyles of the rich and famous. They were seeing things on television every week, and in movies of all of these incredibly wealthy people, and they realized that there was a shortcut to get there. You don't have to go to business school, and you don't have to know all these political contacts. All you got to do is just sell these drugs that are just flowing into the United States through various sources. And so these impoverished people became wealthy, and a lot of them obviously went to prison, and they were just, the drug problem proliferated throughout the 80s and 90s. And obviously this created its own culture. The drug culture created pop culture, artifacts like hip hop music, for instance, and movies like New Jack City, right? And Scarface. And pretty soon what happened, I think, is that as these pop culture attitudes began to pour out cross-culturally, and these white kids who were already rich, who had no reason whatsoever to dabble in the drug trade, they wanted to emulate this. And so they start just doing performance art and cosplay as drug dealers, but, you know, actually dealing drugs and all that. And so I think, like, that's the ultimate conclusion that I draw from the book, is that the drug issue, the drug problem doesn't need to exist anymore, but it exists because there's this feedback loop of, you know, young, frustrated men who want so desperately to exhibit, you know, what they grew up watching on television and listening to in music, right? And so yeah, that's why it proliferates, I think, for a lot of reasons. So yeah, it's an interesting book. It's called Among the Bros. I can't remember who wrote it. It showed up on my Spotify, and I downloaded it. Spotify, I don't know how long they've been doing this. I said I finished the book. Well, what happened is that I've got a subscription to Audible, which is how I get like one free book a month. And then I also have a subscription to Spotify. I have way too many subscriptions, but Spotify I like because it, you know, gives me a lot of music that I can listen to and all that, and podcast and all that for free, right? And I don't know how long they've been doing this. I just was turned on to it recently, but they started offering audiobooks through your monthly subscription. And so I was listening to this audiobook. It's about 16 hours long, and really enjoying it. And then I was within like the last 15 minutes of the book, and it cut off on me. It said, "You've reached your listening limit." That was very shady. I don't like that at all. I don't like how companies kind of like give us stuff for free and then they make us pay for it when we get addicted to it. Very much like a drug, right? Yeah, 28 minutes left on this book that I have. And when I hit play, it says, "Do you want to top up?" It's, you know, so I have to pay $12 extra to finish hearing the rest of this book. That's really annoying. The book was written by Max Marshall. So yeah, Among the Bros, a fraternity crime story. So yeah, if you're interested in that kind of thing, hop on Spotify and, you know, pay to listen to it, I suppose. I don't know. Yeah. So, yeah, in addition to switching recorders, I also switched from coffee to whiskey. So that should be the tagline for this show. That's how I start almost how every show of this Midnight Citizen project goes, right? It's usually like start with a coffee, finish with a cocktail. I like that slogan. I think I'll start using that. Yeah, I'm just waiting out here for Jessica to get done with her show tonight. She's been the last few weeks. She's been doing a show on the weekends called Beautiful. It's the Carole King musical, and it's so strange because she's the understudy for Carole King, and yeah, when she auditioned for the part, I had to film her audition, and she had to learn a few different Carole King songs like Natural Woman and Earth Move, right? Feel the earth move under my feet, you know that song. And so Jessica's been the understudy, but the actress who plays Carole King hasn't gotten sick, so they just had Jessica playing her mom. So, and I guess that's like a rule in theater. If like you're over 40, then you can play a mom, you know. And so, but I did see the show a couple of weeks ago. It was a very good show. It's what they would call like a jukebox musical. It's a show that pretty much purely exists just to where the cast can sing a bunch of very familiar songs, and it's loosely strung together by a narrative. So the play is all about Carole King starting out as a songwriter in New York in the 1960s and eventually working her way up to where she's recording Tapestry. And so, yeah, if like you're a Carole King fan, it's a fun musical, but and I told Jessica this, and I went and saw it with my mom. She's a big Carole King fan, and she said that Tapestry was her favorite album in college. So she loved it. But it's just not a deep show, and I'm not saying that every show needs to be deep, and I'm not even saying that this show needs to be deep. But there is like a specific, like there's a way of writing dialogue, and I guess writing a show and writing a story where even if the sole purpose of the dialogue scenes are to get you to the next song, there's still a way to do it that makes it not so sitcom-y. And that's like my ultimate problem with the show, is that it is very much just like a sitcom where, you know, there's scenes where there's entire exchanges of dialogue just to produce a joke, right? That's a very sitcom thing to do. But yeah, the main problem that I had with the show, though, was like while the music was really good and the cast was great singing all these songs, because it's not just the Carole King songs, it's like all the songs that were associated with that. What's his name on the East Coast? Kirshner, Donnie Kirshner. He was kind of like on the East Coast while Phil Spector was on the West Coast, just producing that wall of sound, you know, kind of thing. That all those girl groups had at the time, and also like there's a bit with the Righteous Brothers where they sing "You've Lost That Love and Feeling." So there's a lot of, you know, different, you know, songs in the show, not just Carole King songs, but yeah, my main problem with the show was the fact that it made show business look like really easy. Like you just write a song and suddenly somebody's performing it and it's a number one hit. And it also just made show business look like a very friendly, you know, bubblegum and lollipop kind of industry, which we know it's not. So it's just a very innocent show. But again, I'm watching it there with my mom, who is the, you know, a baby boomer. You know, she was born in 1953, so she grew up with all this music. And she loved it. Like she was singing to the songs and all that. And I was sitting there like enjoying the songs, but also like whenever any character spoke, it was just so flat and sitcom-y. And, you know, it also just, it was an interest. It felt antiquated in a way because a lot of the music that Carole King and her songwriting partner, Jerry Goffin, were writing, they were writing for these, you know, African-American groups, right? These black girl groups and like the Shirelles, and they were writing for the Drifters and all that. And I feel like the musical could have been elevated if they had just had some scenes of collaboration, like, because you know they had to have collaborated. Like Carole King and Jerry Goffin write a song, and then suddenly the Shirelles are just singing it. It's a number one song. And it doesn't get into that part of the artistic process, which I'm really interested in, which is like, how does a hit become a hit? I think like a great example of this is a great movie from the past few years, by the way, is Love and Mercy. You know, that Brian Williams movie. Brian Williams? No, that's the anchor on NBC. Brian Wilson. You know, it shows Brian Wilson in the studio working with the Wrecking Crew to produce that specific sound that they came up with together for Smile, right? And it just was, it's always so much fun that never gets old to see artists in a narrative setting collaborating to make a song that you know. And yeah, this play was just like, I've got this song in my head. It goes like this. In this dirty old part of the city. And they just start singing the entirety of We Gotta Get Out of This Place by the Animals. Without the show really stopping to actually make the audience think about how difficult it is to create something. You know, you come out of the show just thinking that it's so easy to just like take something from your head and just write it and it's a number one thing, you know. But But again, I know it's like, it's not that kind of show. It is a jukebox musical, just strictly designed to crowd please. And that's totally fine, you know, but, again, it is a show that, because Jessica's doing it at a local theater in town that has a lot of money at stake. They are, you know, constantly doing shows that are not necessarily like, it's not risky political theater. It's generally like very crowd pleasing stuff, you know, like Sister Act, I think they did. So, you know, it's fine. And I think, you know, Jessica's had a good time doing it. But I don't think anybody in that cast would recognize, like, it's a very young cast. And I think they are more used to, like, you know, modern sensibilities of, like, you know, I don't know, I can't speak for them, but I can say that, like, the musical just makes it appear, right, as if that iconic, you know, sound of, you know, of black musical groups at the time, those artists are not responsible for that sound. It's kind of you know, the white people from New York are responsible for it. So that's what it made it sound like. So if that makes any sense, but yeah. I did come up with a title for this episode. I almost never talk about the title. I usually come up with the title just like when I'm putting together the show, but I do like the title for this week's show, and I think I'll talk about it as I've decided to call it Present Laughter, going with that opening thing that I talked about, which is about how it just seems like the present world likes to laugh at you, right? All the time. And Present Laughter is the name of that I remembered from it's like a Noel Coward play. A Noel Coward play called Present Laughter. And ironically enough, I was just looking it up, and the line Present Laughter, or that term, actually comes from the play Twelfth Night by William Shakespeare. And synchronistically, that's the show that Jessica's about to direct. She's about to direct the Shakespeare play Twelfth Night. And she's been preparing for that show and getting ready to cast it and go into production on it when she hasn't been acting. And the actual line is, present mirth breeds present laughter. And I thought that was interesting because, you know, again, like today when I drove by the Arts and Humanities building and I just saw it getting gutted from the outside in and all of its guts hanging out there in the air. It was like not so much the present is laughing at me, but it's just reminding me to laugh in the present, right? To not live so much in the past, to admit that the you know, as we move forward in life, yes, our realities are eroding beneath our feet, and we can't do anything about it. And the only thing that we can do is just kind of be in the present and laugh in the present. And I guess that's pretty much, I don't know, that sounds kind of cliched and kind of corny, but I don't know, at the same time, it's like Occam's razor. It's like, you know, it just, it's simple, and that's what it is, right? So yeah, but I want to thank you so much for joining me here tonight on the Midnight Citizen Show. Just a reminder, you can find this show as well as all my other work over at mikesbonfire.substack.com. You can listen to me on Spotify. You don't have to pay me to listen to me on Spotify, unlike those stupid audiobooks, right? And I'm also on all these other podcast platforms. I'm sure I'm out there on any one you can think of. So, and yeah, you can also listen to me over at the ONSUG, ONSUG.com, the Overnightscape Underground, ONSUG.com. So I look forward to hearing from you in the comments. And yeah, that's the show for tonight. So just listen to some crickets for a minute. I feel like they're laughing at me. Keep your eyes open.